Hey guys, it's American Don. This episode is going to be about a topic that has very emotion to it, and it's something that we need to discuss. It's something that we need to talk about. I have some guests on my show today, and Julie, hello.
Hello.
Julie is a mom. 2 years ago, Julie's daughter committed suicide. We're going to talk about this. We also have a friend, Rick. Rick's with us. Say hello, Rick.
Hey, nice to see y'all.
Rick's a former therapist, retired. This is for educational purposes only. This is not legal counsel. This is not counseling counsel. This is 100% about education of a topic that we have seen and that we have found. And this is something that's in Claremont County, and I think it's important that we discuss. Caylee is your daughter.
Yes.
Caylee was a student in Claremont County at Milford schools.
Yes.
Yes.
She was a sophomore at Milford. She played soccer for 2 years for Milford. She had a lot of passions, but she loved the socialization of school. So going to high school was a fun. She was excited about it. She was excited about the new friends, the opportunities. But sadly, things went downhill her end of her freshman year due to a relationship she got into. And within a year, she took her own life.
Caylee, soccer player, student at Milford High School, was working toward graduation.
Yes, absolutely. She was a great student.
Great. Grades were good?
Yes, she took college prep classes. Sometimes she didn't love that idea, but she took them. She did well. She was always a good student, never had complaints from teachers. I think the biggest complaint I ever had was she talks a lot in class. So that was about it.
Absolutely. So soccer player, good student, had a lot on the ball. Things were moving in a direction.
Very much.
And she got to a spot where she became the victim of suicide.
Yes.
And I do believe I say victim because I think it's a victim crime. Absolutely.
I agree.
Even if it's just self for self. What took place and what happened. And that's the one thing that I reached out as I watched your story. And I know you've been on social media and I've been seeing it. And we were able to connect and talk. And I appreciate you being on my show.
Absolutely.
As I'm looking at all this, I'm wondering why. I'm wondering how. And my thing is, as a retired firefighter, I always relate this to a line of duty death. So when there's a death of a firefighter, they actually launch an entire investigation. It's an LODD, line of duty death, and it's a report.
Again is the aerial photo where you can see 3 showrooms in the front of the store, a distribution warehouse behind the showrooms, and in between repair spaces as well as a loading dock area. Side for another 7,000 square feet. So a total of over 31,000 square feet of display area. The fire then moved into the loading dock, the enclosed loading dock area. Briefly going over the overall timeline, the fire was reported about 6:56 by a passerby on Savannah Highway, the street in front of the store. Manager discharged a couple of fire extinguishers on the loading dock and was unsuccessful in putting out the fire.
And you can break it down, and as they can see on the screen right now, that line of duty report is in detail. What happened, what took place, and what are we doing about it? And it's very specific in the training and development of firefighters to not let that happen again.
Makes a lot of sense.
Everything I can see that got put out, and I have the press release in front of me from Milford schools, they didn't talk about it.
Oh, no.
They're throwing a lot of rhetoric out, and there's things that are laid into this about, we got academic experts, we got mental health people, we got counselors available. Well, I'd love to talk to the counselors. How trained are you? How much do you know? Do you really understand what took place? What was Caylee's favorite dog? Cat? Animal? Do we know a lot about Caylee? Can they describe Caylee? Or are they just putting out boilerplate? Policy, right? And they're throwing down the things that I'm reading here. It's not about a chair. You want to, everybody's talking about this empty chair at the graduation. It's not going to bring Caylee back.
No.
What is this about?
Well, Caylee's gone. I know that. I know she's not coming back. This originally stemmed from numerous of her friends, including one that falls close to her in the alphabet, sharing with me how much they're struggling to balance, I guess, the pain of knowing she's not going to be there and being excited for themselves. And it's really, I'm glad they come to me. I'm honored. But I thought, you know what, let me reach out, because it would be really beautiful to do something to honor that she should be graduating. And to pay respect to a life was lost for no reason at all. And she should be graduating. That's heavy stuff. And the kids don't know how to process that. Adults barely know how to process that. I'm barely processing that.
Sure.
So I have a lot of empathy for that on top of their age. So I decided to reach out, and as seen, you know, basically I felt like I just kept getting a policy as a response. That's basically what I got.
Let me ask you a question here real quick. It's not just about what happened at the end. It was what was missing at the beginning. Why did this get to that escalated level where intervention and prevention sounds like they were just completely absent? What was going on that led her from happy soccer player, you know, and social
Good
friend,
student.
Right.
Mhm.
good student, everything was right.
Mhm.
What pieces happened that led her to that painful decision? Can you piece the beginning of that together? The causes.
Yes. She entered the relationship, like I said before. That was definitely the point of no return in retrospect for me.
Was she prepared to enter a relationship that had that much emotional pull?
Not.
That's a good question.
Not to the level that it was taken to. No, I don't even think an adult could handle the treatment that was going on in the relationship. But no, what 15-year-old kid is, I should have put up more of a stop about it. But, you know, I thought, okay, I'll give her a chance. She's a good student. She's got a good head on her shoulders. You know, this is the time that kids start dating, start experiencing with these things. They're clueless about love. How many people can say that they know?
Right.
You know what I mean?
They're 15.
So
Yeah.
I guess from there, it was almost like a slow pull away from her friends. Her grades dropped. She didn't want to go to school ever at all.
This is after engaging in a relationship.
Correct.
Okay.
And this was probably about 4 months into the relationship, because the beginning of the relationship happened over summer break. And so there wasn't much to, you know, grow on, I guess, for the two of them. It was more at the beginning of her sophomore year. It just started going real hard. So yeah, she wanted to miss school. She started withdrawing from me, which was really, really difficult and very confusing for me, as we had always been very, very close, very close. Obviously, I know teenagers hide things. They don't tell their moms. I'm not oblivious to that. I was a teenager, I remember. So I'm aware that there, you know, even at the time, I thought there's probably things she's not sharing with me. But if I continue to try to have an, you know, open dialogue with her, hopefully she'll feel safe to share it with me. Little did I know how deep, you know, this was getting. She started having physical symptoms, like gastrointestinal symptoms, and was having trouble with vomiting, appetite, anxiety. 2 months before she died, I tried to take her to the mall to, you know, feel good, go pick some clothes out, let's go have girl time and have fun. If she saw even anyone else that could have been her age, she almost immediately was fighting panic and wanted to hide behind me. And I was just so confused I couldn't understand the mentality where her brain was going. And the more I tried to talk to her, the more it was tears, and, we were getting nowhere. So obviously the medical field is where I went next. Pediatrician, she was seeing 2 specialists at children, took 4 months to get in to see a psychiatrist. She was seeing a therapist. We were actually going to therapy at the same place because I was hoping that would encourage, more of the same page. None of these things helped.
Can I ask a question about the therapy a little bit?
Sure.
If you had a heart problem, would you go to a podiatrist?
No, I personally would not.
You'd go to a cardiologist.
Correct.
Probably, right? Okay. So just like any therapist has a specialty, there are marriage therapists, there are all kinds of different therapists. Maybe, and not, of no fault of your own, and probably no fault of the therapist, but a specialist in the right problem. For example, I wouldn't go to an addiction therapist if I needed marriage counseling.
Right.
I'd have to get assessed the minute I walked through the door to be put with the right kind of therapist. So was there, call it a missed opportunity there to maybe intervene?
I would say there was a lot of missed opportunities on every front, but yes, including in the medical field. I mean, she was in through the emergency department and sent home and not kept. And she had lost a significant amount of weight. I mean, there were a lot of concerning factors for me, and I was really upset about that. The quickness to put her on a medication, I question the medication use in teens because she was within that window too at the beginning.
So they were teaching her initially, don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. Don't feel was the big one. We're just going to numb out and pretend your problem's not here and rely on a pill to fix your feelings instead of getting to the cause of them.
Correct. And by the time we got to the point of medication, I was frantic. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I didn't think it was going to result in her death, but I was frantic to help her. And every way I was trying to wasn't getting through. So I was like, okay, let's try it.
It's difficult as a parent, and I know as a parent, I'm a dad, right? And it's difficult. I'm seeing things. I don't know. What do we do? So we reach out to professionals, or at least ones we thought they were, right? And they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what was really offered to guide her through this?
Nothing. I kept having to make moves, make appointments, say, keep looking, draw more blood, and I mean, something's not right. And for her to have even gone to any of those doctor's appointments and really not had an immediate psychiatric assessment to figure out what's going on. Why is that not something immediately done when you have complaints to this degree? You have physical symptoms, you have mental symptoms, you have a distraught parent who's present,
Would it be fair to say that had somebody assessed her for, I'm going to use a generic term, okay, and I'll explain right after, codependency. She was getting her identity from his behavior.
Correct.
So codependency, I don't know if you know this or not, but codependency and post-traumatic stress disorder, long after the trauma, the stress is acted out. Did she have breakups with the boyfriend? Did she?
Oh, constantly.
Very overwhelming and aggressive?
Very much so.
Wow. So attempts were being made to get out of it.
Her response was solely based on that other individual's comments, actions, but it was so extreme. At least to me, in the position I was in, I'm like, why are we getting this extreme? Because limited information's coming to me again. Right. So yeah, but then on the other side of that, how are you going to help a kid that doesn't even understand to help themselves? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's
so lack of information.
Correct.
And 8 hours a day, she gets that information from where? 5 days a week. Full-time job, 40 hours a week. Where does she get her information?
Probably TV shows and social media.
School, friends, school,
right.
Right. So what are people not talking about that might have either made her ears open up or her eyes to see the situation for what it was, or for somebody outside to recognize this student is losing weight, hypervigilant, breaking the pattern of emotional consistency that she had all the way up to age 15.
Correct.
These people all saw her regularly. So what might have been the best possible course? Well, we taught her reading, we taught her writing, we taught her arithmetic, things she'll use her whole life. But isn't the biggest single thing we use is relationships, coping mechanisms, how to deal with our well-being? Do you see a need for that?
Very much so. Very much so. There's no core class she ever had to teach her that. There's no core class I ever had.
Correct.
I grew up in a home that any sort of domestic violence was not present at all. There was nothing going on like that. I'm luckily, gratefully never been in a situation where I've experienced that. So I had a lack of education on it. So that's just being handed down, the cluelessness, you know what I mean? So yeah, the school implementing some kind of program or some kind of class to teach more into the addiction, more into the issues of codependency, even in friendships. I'm not even talking romantically. I've watched friendships in high school destroy, a kid mentally in similar ways. So that's just a big failure when the two places kids are spending their most time at is home and school. So yeah, your responsibility is pretty big at home and at school to do whatever you need to do to protect kids, and that's educating. School's got the education part.
Back in my day, we used to have very active drug and alcohol programs that taught symptomology and the negative side effects, etc. We have no prevention to get uninvolved with narcissistic personalities. We have no prevention to get uninvolved in a codependency situation or where there's drug usage with a partner, a boyfriend, whatever. We have no intervention until, and I saw the announcement from Milford schools, until after the fact. And if you could see something going forward, what could you see that might have made a difference, if not in Caylee's life, but in the next generation coming up? Because no change means you're going to get the same results.
I think that mental health should become a core part of the curriculum. I think as much as you need math, science, and reading, you should have a mental health class. And I think it should be appropriate to change with kids as they age. Because obviously a kid in 5th grade is not going to be able to handle the type of information you present to a sophomore in high school. So, it's another thing, needs to be appropriate, but I think it should be consistent throughout.
Maybe a different name instead of mental health.
Yes.
What about behavioral health?
Yeah.
Because it's your behavior ultimately that makes for bad choices with drugs or bad choices with your life or relationships. If you can intervene on that, isn't that the real homage to Caylee?
Yeah.
Is to stop the next child, because child suicide, teen suicide has been going on for decades. Correct. It's much less prevalent now. But it's not like it's contagious. It's not like chicken pox, It is something that is easily preventable and has a predictable outcome both ways. You either intervene and prevent it and teach them, if you've been sexually assaulted, you report it right away and you do this and that. Or if you have been emotionally abused, because the bruises on the outside, all of us can see.
Right.
But the bruises on the inside, which appear to be the case here, it's very difficult to see, especially not to the trained eye.
I think another part too is that when kids do go to staff, there's bullying from that, because in some way, shape, or form, they're going to know who went, or it just comes around to slap them in the face again. So why would you feel safe reaching out about a bully when you feel like you're just going to be retaliated on again? I don't know what the answer to dealing with that is, but that's a big issue to me.
It's difficult because a lot of times, and I'm not defending school districts at all. Most school districts are not equipped to handle this kind of stuff.
Correct.
Right?
I
I'm there
agree.
to teach math. 2 + 2 is 4, right? Yeah. That's math, reading, writing, arithmetic, so 3 R's. There is no communication in the middle of all that they teach. If your toilet's clogged at home, who do you call?
Plumber.
A plumber, right? If your grass is too high and you need to get your grass cut, who do you call? Landscaper,
Yeah.
right? So if something's wrong with my light at home or my ceiling fan, I call an electrician. My daughter's losing weight. My daughter's having trouble. Who do I call? The school counselor? No. The math teacher? No. Who? Who at that school is qualified to go up and down and said that's who you would go to? After the fact, they put out all this information about, we have grief counselors and we have this counselor and we have a mental health and we have a senior advisor. What about before that?
Right.
Hey, I'm struggling. Did you guys put out any documents to her then? And I'm not saying that Milford Schools is wrong here. I'm saying that if we do a line of duty death report, like the firefighters do when a fireman goes down, and many have, and I respect all cops and firemen, anytime there's a death there, they do a report that's so extensive, it's hundreds and hundreds of pages. Why are we not doing that with Caylee?
You saying that makes me think I have a background in the medical field. As a nurse, you document everything that patient does, every which way they turn their head, breathe. Every part of the body is documented.
Right.
Why can't teachers maybe in one class jot down, this kid was falling asleep in my class, keep an eye on him. And that's shared through teachers. Or this kid's really tense today. Let's keep an eye on him. This kid came in crying. I don't know why. Next class can see that when the kid comes in. You know what I mean? Like, it's just simple.
What about a procedure that's already in place for the state, which is mandatory testing? We do testing at the end of each grade to find out, did they learn how to read? And yet you get passed along to 12th grade and you have a 7th grade reading level.
Idea.
Huge information.
So,
Eighth graders are not proficient in either reading or in math, 70%. 40% of fourth graders lack even basic reading skills, can't read. Students in our public elementary and middle schools score worse in reading today than when the department opened by a lot.
It's massive.
and that's just
We're failing
a brief
the
test,
kids.
right? Well, we also do an assessment not only for what they've learned educationally, but we do behavioral assessment when we see behaviors that aren't right, et cetera, weight loss, mood, et cetera. Why are we not doing periodic testing? Like, for example, if your children, like my children, are autistic and they're both intellectually disabled, they do testing mandatory every 3 years to see that what the improvement was, what the improvement wasn't.
Right.
Are they missing stuff? Are we going too fast for them to learn? Do we need to slow things down? In other words, they take a quick peek. It takes them a couple hours to do the assessment in the right problem area. And, not drug testing like testing their urine, but
Right.
drug testing their knowledge, drug testing, their possible usage, et cetera. You don't penalize them. You do it anonymously,
Yeah.
not with their name, with a number system. And that way, a counselor can come in and go, well, 70% of the graduating class is using alcohol and drugs at least 4 times a week. We wonder why they're not able to read.
Right.
30% of our ninth graders have suicidal ideation. They think about, have you ever thought, I wish I was dead. I was gone.
Mm-hmm.
If that one little simple question could have put her on the radar for some regular therapy right from the get-go. Have you ever felt bullied, picked on? Do you ever feel like you're not good enough? What I really asked with that question is, do you understand what shame is versus guilt?
Mm-hmm.
You've got a child with shame.
Yes.
You have a child that lives to validate, see, I'm no good. That right there is huge red flags. A simple test once a year, once every other year, whatever, or as needed, would certainly been a step in the right direction, do you think?
Absolutely. And the more I've reflected on all of this, what do we do with the bullies that has numerous complaints, say, against numerous students. Okay, maybe that kid gets caught bullying, disciplined, case shut, closed. It's not shut and closed for that kid at all. What intervention are we doing for that bully? Because there's something going on with that bully to treat somebody else like that.
I think that's a great point, and I think
That's
that
the
a lot of times, and people talk about you go back to like, what was your childhood like, or what happened to them, and there's a level where we see relationship abuses, where a woman will stay in a relationship even though she's being abused over and over and over. You've seen this in your practice.
Yeah.
Constantly stay in that situation because they don't think they're good enough to leave it and go stand on their own and be on their own, or have the confidence to say, I'm going to be okay without this person in my life. And then it's worse because when she tries to turn it off and then he keeps texting her. Did you get into her phone and look at her text?
Oh, yeah.
Was it?
Oh, it's terrible. It is absolutely sickening.
Hold on. That's not in this report.
I have binders.
That's not in this report. How come that's not being talked about?
Well,
good question.
The other thing is,
that's not in the official press release. I should know. How come I didn't know that?
First love is intense.
Correct.
And there's your first problem. Before you even have a problem, you've got love. The definition of love. What's the healthy definition of love? The ability to work, play, and recreate. Well, if you see any of those missing, what's the healthy definition of a healthy relationship? Trust, respect, intimacy, passion, and commitment. You take a 5-legged table and you start pulling legs out, that table's going over. It's predictable failure.
Right.
So if I'm hearing you right, she didn't have any of the tools like a calculator or a pen and paper to figure out math problems, or a resource of any kind to say, this doesn't look or feel right. What I learned in class about relationships, some people think relationship addiction doesn't exist. That's like saying gambling addiction doesn't exist, or that alcoholism doesn't exist. It's not a disease or drug addiction.
Almost anything.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Overeating.
they have this misconception of the facts. That, you have to drink every day to be an alcoholic. No, not true. You can drink once or twice a year, but every time you drink, you wake up, in a new police station. Relationship addiction has very defined symptoms. And that's what we see most with, we're going to call it puppy love, or that first love, that intensity, because there's no boundary, no definitions, no understanding. I think we're undereducating, and we're definitely too far behind on intervention. We're not even all decades of suicides, and it's becoming more frequent.
And I own part of my part where I failed Caylee, but even pieces out of my control, like her dad dying when she was a little girl. I wasn't in any serious relationships after that for a very long time. I also struggled very much after he died. So she's watching all this as a kid, you know what I mean? Which just was like the perfect setup.
Human beings
it was almost
have
the perfect setup.
And we pass them along to our children. That's another thing.
The older I get, the more compassion and empathy I have for my parents, because I know they were doing their best. And I spent quite a bit of time trying to blame them for me, you know what I mean? They were doing beyond their best,
I will say this, and I think that this was never the plan.
No, this was not what was supposed to happen.
And this wasn't the plan for Caylee. No. And it breaks my heart, and I'll say this, and I'm so sorry it happened. I'm so sorry that little girl did not have another way to think through this. And that's the whole idea of this episode of our show, is we need to be able to break these down. That's it? 3 pages? My daughter comes down to 3 pages? Are you kidding?
Right.
How about hundreds of pages like they do the line of duty deaths?
Yeah.
How about we find out exactly what happened, all the details, and anybody that had a negative effect on Caylee, let's go get them help. Let's go figure out their problems too. Because if we're all like here together,
right,
and we're trying to walk through this together, because I promise you, I've been involved with deaths that happen in the fire department, and trust me, we have debriefing sessions.
Yeah.
Where we can sit down and debrief. Has any counselor ever sat down to debrief with you?
No.
So
this is what's missing for you. This isn't an empty chair. at a graduation.
Yeah.
This is some closure, some pieces, some things that are going to, because this is good. You'll never get over this in a sense that, oh, it was okay. I'm okay now.
Right.
It's great. You're always going to miss Caylee. You're always going to have that piece.
Yes.
But I would suggest, what's wrong if we have Caylee sessions?
Yeah.
Where a kid's struggling and we sit down, we're going to have a Caylee session. Sit down with a guy like Rick and said, let's process this through. Let's figure out what it is. Well, Rick can come out and goes, I got a report on what I'm finding, and here's what's happening here, and da-da-da-da-da, whatever it may be. The route she goes to school, we need to change. Or we need to figure out, get her in better classes. Reach out to different places for her to hang out at. Because she probably was stuck in the same routine to where she goes to the mall and wants to hide behind you. Where do I take that to? Where do I go with that information? You know?
It's a classic case of, if I don't address it, it doesn't exist. It's denial. It's rationalization.
Kick the can.
That is how I felt in the school, medical, all of it. That's how I felt.
And here's the saddest part. I mean, the old definition of insanity: repeating action the same way and expecting different results. Well, the school system evaluates their teaching methods. They evaluate, they test you to graduate. The only thing they're not testing for is the thing that ultimately, and my understanding is it might have been Turpin School District or some other school district had multiple suicides in 1 year.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I did hear about that.
Yes.
And
yes.
So, back in...
And I'd love to read the full reports on those if we did an LODD report.
Exactly.
If we could lay it down and said, what actually happened?
Yeah.
Because we don't know.
Because things went wrong. There should be more question on where. Where did it go wrong? Because it's not just one piece.
The cause.
I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
This is the effect.
And it
we want
might
to know
not
the
just
cause.
be black and white right here.
Yes.
Here's a cause. No, it might be a little of this, a little of that. Well, then we need to work a little bit on that. We need to work a little bit on that.
Is it an invasion of a student's privacy or anything like that to say, we don't want you to be the next school shooter. We don't want you to be unhappy with a pregnancy or this or that. Anything that might affect you for the rest of your life. We're teaching the skills supposedly to get through life, but are we? So, it's time to be more proactive. When you see numbers increase, then it's no longer intervention. There's a desperate need for prevention.
I've done a show one time on sports. And I sat down and I really looked at, like, a lot of the kids were like, they told me I was going pro. They told me I was getting a college scholarship. They told me that if you join our organizations and pay the $3,500, we're going to give you the best skill instruction out there. We're going to introduce you to colleges. And at the end of it all, when I talked to these kids, none of that happened at all. It was a sales pitch, right? If you take kids that are riding the bench and someone sat down and said, I'm going to help you, and you go teach them the game and go give them the skill set and go build them up, I'll bet you there's a diamond in the rough out there just going, man, I ended up being a good soccer player because they broke it down for me. They didn't do that. And there's a lot of kids that ride the bench because of that. You agree?
Yeah.
You agree? Yeah. Sports nowadays, literally, and there are a lot of kids that hate the sport because I didn't get played. Well, you weren't the instant player. I couldn't put you on the field. We had to win the game. But the kid is sitting on the bench, and I'm guilty. I coached for many, many years. And a lot of times I'm like, God, I did not get those kids enough playing time. But I didn't go get their skill set either. I didn't break down who they were. I didn't know what their dog's name was or get to know them better. A lot of times, again, we are not blaming Milford schools. This is not an attack at Milford schools at all. It's an attack on our system in this country. It's an attack on the fact that we need better. We deserve better. We need to know how to have a kid. Because you call 241 kids, you're going into a whole nother world. I don't think they exist anymore. Right?
No, they exist.
They exist.
That's JFS. That's where I worked for the first 5 years.
Which there's politics there too, right? Breaking all that down. Where do you go? Where do you take this information? That's what we want to come up with.
Yeah, I don't have the answer, but it needs to be talked about so we can get somewhere.
Well,
I agree.
Throwing it out in it worded slightly differently, when the pain of what you're doing outweighs the pain of change, that's when you'll get change. That's when you change. We're not a society that's motivated to think proactively. We're motivated usually by the tragedy after the fact. And that's so sad, Because you asked earlier about, the consequences to the bully. The bully didn't wake up when he was 6 years old and go, I'd like to aspire to be a good
No.
bully by ninth grade. That's not how
I-
anybody wakes
I
up.
firmly believe bullies are not born. They
Yeah.
are not born.
However,
No, right. Neither is racism. Neither is
Correct.
sexism.
Correct.
Right? Yes.
whatever
Yes.
you're
It's learned behavior.
whatever you're
Yes.
familiar with is
Mhm.
what you seek out, and whatever you practice is what you become good at. Most bullies, most rapists, etc., most incest cases, about 90% had been through it themselves.
Yes.
And so you trace the problem back. You do that investigation and you do it down to the most minute detail. And then you have to have two things to make change in that department. You're never going to get rid of bullies, but what you can do is head them off through enough consequences and education. So, for example, a guy that gets 6 DUIs, why do you get 6? Because he didn't have any consequences from the previous 5. He learned, well, I got a slap on the wrist and I got 2 days off school. Yay, I got to go play. And I got rewarded for being, mean. They should have a year of mandatory counseling. They should have follow-up assessments, etc. You keep your thumb on them, just like probation. It's not cutting off their freedoms or anything else. It's just saying, as long as you're a danger to yourself and others, we're not going to let that. We're not going to turn a blind eye.
Right. We shouldn't be tolerating it.
Right.
And we are.
Correct.
And that's
a sign that
embarrassing.
someone's having a personal problem. Somebody's in trouble. Somebody's
That
all
doesn't
of it.
excuse you're responsible for your actions.
Absolutely not.
But there's a problem, and I think it's our responsibility, just period, as humans, to help you try to figure out what that problem is.
As the adults in the room, it's our job.
Right.
It's our job to give them the tools to resolve the problem before they can really do harm on a larger level.
Right.
My heart breaks, and I can only offer some sincere solutions. And then you have to try them and see what works and what doesn't. But what I do know is that after the fact, doesn't work. We've seen decades of that. Maybe it's time to look at things through a different set of eyes and understand cause and effect and become more proactive.
And all the things that I've experienced in life, I really thought this was one that was never going to happen to me. I never in a million years, and how many parents I know probably think that same thing, or are like, wow, I subconsciously think that, oh, I hear about it. That's terrible, but that won't happen to us. Well, it
Not
does.
my kid.
It does.
Right.
You're an amazing guest, and telling your story takes a lot of guts. We're not trained to deal with grief either.
No.
I didn't get a grief class in school,
Right.
but I can tell you there's many lessons there to be learned.
And this is why I started that GoFundMe, because I think there needs to be affordable grief retreats. You should be able to take your whole family somewhere local for a weekend. We feed you, we separate you off into groups, or do whatever it is you need. You need to paint, co-paint, just give options. Like, you know what I mean? But a family to go together and be able to grieve and be, each mentality talked to and worked through. There's nothing like that. You look up something like that, it's $7,000 in California. I can't go to that.
I think some of this is open in my mind, even as we talk. Like I'm compassionate, absolutely. But as I'm talking, I'm sitting there going, wow, I could have done that better with my kids. Oh, I could have done that better with my wife. Oh, I could have done that better. And learning from that.
That's why.
But then having somewhere to go process that, somewhere to go and so I know they created Marcy's Law, and it came out in November 2017, and it's Ohio crime victims. It's a Bill of Rights and affords victims certain rights when they're a victim. Caylee's a victim.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And it's probably a montage. There's probably several things that happened in Caylee's life that created where she ended up.
I agree.
No doubt about it.
Yes.
How do we stop that and help them at that time? Because people are acting out now, right? We're seeing a transgender. Well, most of the transgender people that have gone back and talked to have trauma in their life. Some of them have issues that happen in their life to where they end up where they're at. There's a lot of cases that people acting out where they scratch on themselves. That's a big indicator when you see someone trying to harm themselves. Hey, you're in a lot of pain.
Right.
But who do you go to for that? You go to the plumber, you go to the landscaper, but cutting on yourself.
I mean,
struggling with sexuality, whatever it may be. Who do you
had to do my own research.
Right.
There was not even the doctors could give me, the school didn't give me any, you know what I mean? Nobody could help point me anywhere.
If she died in a car wreck, what kind of reaction do you think she'd be getting at graduation?
I think she'd be getting a chair, a diploma, or whatever, a slideshow, or whatever the students wanted.
They have before, correct?
Or yes,
That's
yes,
true.
I
That's
have
factual. Yes.
numerous evidence pieces.
Well, I'm going to say this out now. A child dying is a travesty,
Agreed.
even if it's suicide.
Agreed.
Because right now you get positive reaction if you die in a car wreck or you die in something, a house fire, something along that line.
Right.
But you have a suicide. There's a level here of cancel culture.
Absolutely.
They want to kick the can and just kick it down the road. Oh my gosh, we don't talk about it. Suicidologists are employed by schools. They have suicidologists. And they come in and they come up with, we're instructed, according to this code, here's research on suicide recognition in schools. You shouldn't do not glamorize. I'm not glamorizing anything. I want to know why this happened. So I will say this, that this is part one of many series I want to sit down and do on suicide. Where do we break it down and start finding hope for these kids? I mean, I've heard stories where kids got removed out of school and taken off and said, we're going to put you into some situations to learn better about how to deal with what you're going through. We used to have rehabs back in the day. There were care units, and they had different places where removing somebody and putting them in an environment to learn about what they're going through. They need specialized
care.
Yeah.
Long-term inpatient care to address an issue that serious. When I left practice, there was 17 inpatient facilities, and about 7 of those were just for under age 18. And they were long-term.
Yes.
Now, a big zero.
Yep.
None. And that's a reflection of our drug problem too.
Yeah.
When there's nowhere to send anybody and they're not getting the information up front, that's how you end up with fentanyl overdose that was totally unintended, because there are what are now looked at as suicides that are actually overdoses or other things.
Yeah.
They intended to buy one thing and one hit later they're gone. I think you have so much more to your story to tell. And I can't wait to hear part 2.
Break this open and extrapolate. What do we need to go do? Because some of it, you're like, I don't know the exact answer. I just know there's got to be more here.
Well, I'm hoping that if I continue to be honest, even where, it's embarrassing or hard for me, I'm hoping students feel confident to be embarrassed. I didn't tell on this, so talk to other students. Tell on this if you see it. Maybe the school can reflect. Where did I go wrong? Let's be honest with ourselves. You know what I mean? It's just, I think it starts there.
Why don't I kind of say one last statement about how to kind of wrap up today's cast? They say there's 3 kinds of love. There's a love for a man for a woman. There's a love for a man for his dog. But there's no kind of love like there is from one like experience to the other. In other words, parents that have been through this situation, or aunts, uncles, any connection that's deep, friends, should probably unite around this to say, what can we do as a group? How can we bring our power together and put it to change?
Yes.
And it's the same thing as, I'm not the man I want to be and I'm not the man I ought to be, but thank God I'm not the system or policy that I used to have that clearly wasn't working.
Yes.
And I'd like to commit as American Don on the American Don show to start meeting and maybe we start having talk sessions. Maybe, and we have a great space in Claremont County. We're in it right now, right?
Yeah.
it's our X space. And this is a meeting time where we come in and there's all kind of people that can have meetings here. But one thing would be grief. Another would be, what do I do when I know my child's starting to struggle?
Yes.
Not my kid. They wrote a book about that, and then they didn't know what to do. They had no idea what to do, and then they were lost. And I'm going to say this out loud, and I appreciate you coming on the show for sure. Looking forward to meeting you further. Rick, thanks for joining in. Absolutely.
Thank you for inviting me.
Guys, I want to just say this out loud, and I hope you learned some stuff in this show, and I learned a lot. I learned that we need to be doing more. We need to be stepping up and getting into these spaces and getting into these groups. I'm going to start inviting students to come on this show so we can sit down and say, what problems are you having? And just start to open it up. Do I have all the answers? No. Am I willing to come on video and say, let's try? Yes. And that's the key. There's a lot of great groups out there that Climb Out, Raise Right, Boots on the Ground, Bikers for Trump, and they're doing Constitution classes now because it's not being taught in civics. They're seeing what's missing and starting to provide that now. That's what we need to do. We need to get together in these spaces, be able to sit down at a table, open session, and go, what problems are we having? Whether it be in sports, it be in school, or it be at home with your parents, or it be you parents that are with the kids, whatever it may be. I get lost, and there's times I go for long walks because I'm like, I did not handle my daughter that well. How can I get better at that? But I don't have a bat line to call. There's no like social line to do that. But we as Christians can sit down and do that together. We can sit down and talk like we're doing right now and open up and make a phone call to say, I need to be better. How do I do that? So that's what this episode was about. It's about breaking it down. It's kind of like an overall investigation of my life because there's no safe place to go do that. Yeah, there is. Absolutely. And I encourage you to reach out. So I appreciate you coming on for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Good to meet you. Rick, thanks for coming on the show. We'll see you guys again soon. God bless you. God bless the United States.